road trip to history in the panhandle of West Virginia, where the Shenandoah and the mighty Potomac unite. The past and the present blend together in one of the oldest and most historic towns in America. Welcome to beautiful Shepherdstown, West Virginia.
Thomas Shepherd acquired land here in 1734, and in anticipation of selling lots began to lay out the town. He was able to get the town chartered by the Virginia House of Burgesses in 1762. This location was amazing because of the fertile land and numerous local springs. One of them, Flowing Springs, runs north towards the Potomac River, then falls about 100 feet down a lush and rocky hill to the river. Near the top and close to one of the earliest streets, the founder built a grist mill in 1738, which still stands. Today, the mill is privately owned. In 1788, a tobacco warehouse was built where town runs enters the Potomac River. The warehouse was used to store tobacco and other produce from the area before shipment. Near the tobacco warehouse are ruins of several mills. Both sides of 2 blocks of German Street, the main street of town, are lined with very fine commercial buildings. These mostly brick buildings create a human-scaled environment. Some of them were originally residences that have been converted to commercial use in the 19th century. In several instances, the change was simply one of use, but there is at least one 18th century home where large opening lintels and store windows were installed. In addition, Shepherdstown boasts 200 private residences that are historic. Taken together, the commercial buildings in these residences establish the character of the town. Raisin Shepherd, grandson of the founder and son of Abraham, went to New Orleans and made his fortune, and returned home to spend it by building for the town. First a small church, then a much larger church, then a large impressive building built to be the county seat and now used as the centerpiece building of the university. His brother, James Hervey Shepherd, also went to New Orleans and came home with a wife. Later, he festooned their home on German Street with New Orleans ironwork. A local resident, James Rumsey, tinkered with an idea he had which resulted in the successful launch of the first steamship. Rumsey's feat was celebrated at Wynkoop Tavern, one of the many in the town. Others included a tavern and a hotel run by the Antler brothers. Another tavern was run by Catherine Weltzheimer, and this is the Old Yellow House on High Street. Homes in Shepherdstown include log cabins masquerading as later wood or masonry buildings, craftsman-style houses, one wonderful Hudson River Gothic residence, and a few wood Queen Anne-style homes. And surely most loved house in Shepherdstown is the Little House near Town Run. It even has a matching frame barn, but no miniature horses. Shepherdstown also retains numerous carriage steps, smokehouses, and privies, and these can sometimes be seen by peering into backyards.
My name is Charles Printz, retired Navy commander, teacher, businessman, and past President General of the National Society of the Sons of the American Revolution. I remember well the day in 1988 when the Secretary of the Army, John Marsh, asked me to take part in the pivotal moment of the history of the United States Army that took place just outside Shepherdstown. We commemorated here with a full ceremony the place where 100 men left Virginia to join the first United States Army, the Continental Army. With liberty or death stitched into their hunting shirts, they marched 600 miles in 24 days in the dead heat of summer in 1775 and marched to Boston to join their comrade in arms, George Washington. The security of the past was gone, and the future as soldiers completely uncertain. They knew all that. Yet they all enlisted, providing their own provisions and rifles, and they dared to fight for a new nation. It was said that they could hit an orange at 100 yards. They had to. With the support of their families, they had to be able to shoot to survive. So when George Washington saw the likes of his old friends on the edge of the drill field in Cambridge on August 11th, he dismounted. Then there were many tears. He shook the hands of all his old buddies, the men he had known since the days of Fort Duquesne. They all somehow knew the greatest truth, that a plowman in Massachusetts needed their support against the British onslaught, just as much as Virginia needed the plowman. In that compact, a nation was born. And then first glimpse and resolve of nationhood began here in the groves outside Shepherdstown.
This beautiful home outside of Shepherdstown is called Bellevue. It's the home of the Shepherd family. And but for a quirk of fate, it could have been the White House in the nation's capital. Shepherdstown was in the running to become the nation's capital. It applied along with dozens of other towns, and Congress had stipulated that it had to be along the Potomac River, which is right over here, and a little bit on Maryland and a little on the Virginia sides. Shepherdstown made a substantial proposal in both money and land. And what we had going for us is we knew the man who was going to pick the place, George Washington. And he came up here and he saw Monocacy that wanted to be the nation's capital, Williamsport and Shepherdstown. And he thought about it a little bit. He picked another place and he called it Washington. And you know what? That's pretty okay. He has good judgment and it shows.
James Rumsey got to build a steamboat because George Washington couldn't afford to dig a canal. Washington and some investors wanted to make it possible to send boats up and down the river, but they couldn't afford to actually dig a canal, which would have been the best way. They had to actually cut channels through the rocks and the ledges in the river so boats could go up and down. And that's great if you're sending a boat downstream, but if a boat has to go upstream, it means that they have to fight the current all the way. So that was a problem for them. But about a year before they were going to start working, Washington ran into James Rumsey, what's now Berkeley Springs. Rumsey had a plan, a design, for a couple of mechanical boats, one of which was a steamboat. And that would solve this problem of actually getting boats upriver. And a very short time after that, Rumsey found himself working for the Potomac Company in charge of a big crew of guys digging through rocks down at what's now Harper's Ferry. And he was also building a boat. And it's probably the only time in history when somebody has been able to both build a boat to fit the river and carve the river to fit his boat. Now, if this had been a movie, of course, everybody would have been successful and fame and fortune would have followed Rumsey, but it wasn't, actually. It wasn't successful. What occurred was that instead everybody found that just cutting a channel through the river was a lot more expensive and complicated, and Rumsey found that building a boat was a lot more expensive and complicated. But on December 3rd, 1787, Rumsey did demonstrate a steamboat in front of Shepherdstown. And when that bicentennial was coming up in the 1980s, J. Hurley, a local resident here, decided to be great, to build a replica. And we did. And we probably involved 100 people, and Jay probably worked on it full-time for a couple of years. And when we were done, after a lot of work, it was a very complicated process, we discovered we had an experimental boat. And it took a lot of work to run it. It took a lot of work to figure out how to do it. And after 20 years of that, we decided we're done. We took it up to the Hudson River for the Fulton Bicentennial, ran it around, came back, and now it just sits here.
In September of 1862, a small tactical battle occurred just outside of Shepherdstown, what was then Virginia. While the battle was small, involving only about 9,000 troops and incurring approximately 677 casualties, the battle had an enormous effect on the outcome of the Civil War and American history. The Battle of Shepherdstown took place over 2 days, September 19th and 20th of 1862. The major part of the infantry battle occurred on the morning of September 20th, and the battle was fought across this farm
that was then called the Osborne Farm. It was owned by James Osborne. And in that house, there was lodged a Union artillery shell left over from the Battle of Shepherdstown. On the evening of September 18th, Lee ordered his army to retreat from Antietam and cross into Virginia at Boatler's Ford on the Potomac. He then put his army in motion towards another ford near Williamsport in order to cross the Potomac and continue his campaign in Maryland. Boatler's cement mill and the adjacent kilns roughly marked where Confederate Major General William Pendleton commanded 600 infantrymen and 34 effective artillery pieces to guard Lee's movement. The fighting began on the afternoon of September 19th as Union artillery outgunned the Confederates 2-1 from the Maryland side of the river. The inexperienced General Pendleton, a West Point graduate who had resigned from the Army to become an Episcopal minister, desperately sought help from General Lee as Union infantry began to cross the river. About midnight, he finally found General Robert E. Lee and told him that all was lost at the river. Luckily, his troops were much more disciplined than he was, and they retreated from the river, taking with them 30 of their artillery pieces. The Union Army returned on the morning of September 20th and advanced about 1.5 miles south of the Potomac. Around 10 a.m., Stonewall Jackson with A.P. Hill's Light Division met the Union advance and attacked. Here at the site of the then Osborne Farm, Union forces, while fighting the Confederates, retreated back to the ford and Maryland. All except the ill-starred 118th Pennsylvania Volunteers, nicknamed the Corn Exchange Regiment. New recruits all. Not given the retreat orders when the other units had, the regiment's men found themselves trapped with newly issued rifles that didn't work, and the attackers driving them towards this 100-foot bluff. Many who did make it to the river were struck by shells from their own artillery. The 118th lost about 40% of their men. The rest escaped over a dam. The battle results in an interesting question for historians. What if Lee had returned to Maryland to continue his Maryland campaign? Might the Confederacy have accomplished all that they wished and gained their independence? We'll never know. But we do know one thing, and that is the Battle of Shepherdstown resulted in the retreat of the Army of Northern Virginia, enabling President Abraham Lincoln to declare a military victory and justify his issuance of the Emancipation Proclamation.
In the wake of war, there's nothing more poignant than a gravestone with the simple words "unknown" that are here at Elmwood Cemetery. That young soldier remains nameless, and there's somebody somewhere that would give anything to know where they are. Shepherdstown was just 2 miles away as the crow flies from the bloodiest day in American military history, the Battle of Antietam on September 17, 1862. And everyone talked about one thing, the noise. It sounded like Niagara Falls at the battlefield with 100 muskets fired every second and 40 rounds of artillery fire. Here, a young girl named Minnie Bettinger Mitchell remembered later in life, "It seems to me now that the roar of that day began with the light, and all through its long and dragging hours, its thunder formed a background to our pain and terror."
Early settlers came across the Potomac River at Pack Horse Ford from Maryland to Virginia to settle Mecklenburg, which was later to become Shepherdstown, the oldest town in West Virginia. The formation of the churches was their first priority. They first met in their homes, and then they built log structures to meet in, and after that they built the beautiful architectural structures that adorn the streets of Shepherdstown. The oldest congregation is the Presbyterian Church, established in 1743. The brick church was built in 1836. The English church building was erected in 1745. Then in 1859, Reverend Shepherd donated the clock that was placed in the tower of this church. The Christ Reformed Church was built in 1782. The bell tower was built by Michael Guthrie and contains 4 bells which he had made and shipped here from France. The old Lutheran Church congregation was established in 1765. In 1795, a beautiful brick church building was constructed across the street from the Christ Reformed Church. This Lutheran church was destroyed by fire in 1924, believed to have been started by a spark from a passing train. In 1881, the Catholics held services in their homes until St. Agnes Roman Catholic Church was built in 1891. As with the Methodist Church, the congregation was split north and south, each with its own stately brick building. In 1940, the two churches reunited. After the Battle of Antietam, all the churches were used as hospitals except the Episcopal Church. Churches for the black residents originated from the war between the states. In 1867, the Asbury Methodist Church was located in the Old English Church. The St. John's Baptist Church was built in 1869, and a new church building was built in 1949 on the west end of town. I remember on Sunday morning at 9 o'clock, all the church bells rang at the same time, pealing out to the residents of the town, calling them to the church services of their choice. Several churches established their own graveyards. The old Episcopal graveyard has Revolutionary soldiers buried there. Rose Hill Cemetery is the burial ground for the Shepherdstown black residents. The old Shepherd Cemetery contains the graves of the Thomas Shepherd family and their connections. The Irish Catholic Cemetery was the burial ground for the Irish immigrants who came here to work on the C&O Canal. They died during a cholera epidemic. After churches were established in Shepherdstown, their attention turned toward education and schools. The schools were held in the homes or the churches, and usually the ministers were the teachers, and that was a way to supplement their incomes. In 1774, the German schoolhouse was built in the corner of German and College Street. The first public schools were started in Shepherdstown in 1847 for grades 1 through 8. The first district school was erected in 1848, and it operated until 1881. The grade school was established in 1901, and they built this steel cylinder by the back of the building from the second floor for us to escape for fires. And when we practiced our fire drill, we had to slide down this steel cylinder and land in a sandbox at the bottom. The black residents had their first school in 1867 on Brown's Alley. Shadyside School on West High Street was the first free school for blacks, and it was built in 1883, and it has since been destroyed. In 1929, Shepherdstown High School was open for grades 7 to 12. Today, it is a middle school. The story of Shepherd University began in 1859. The town hall was erected by Reverend Shepherd, and the clock was moved from the old Episcopal Church to this building where it is today. It was to be the first building of Shepherd College, named for the first principal, Joseph McMurrin, in 1872. Today, Shepherd College has grown from a state normal school to Shepherd University in 2004, offering master's degree with an enrollment of nearly 5,000 students.
Carolyn Danska Dandridge lived here over 100 years ago. She lived for many years here, and she was known nationally and abroad as a poet, a historian, and an expert gardener. Her journals and musings about life and Shepherdstown, people in general, and those she loved touched my heart and my imagination deeply. When I go to the garden with my troubles, the flowers know just what to do. They don't say a word. They don't torment me with senseless conversation. They just look at me. And their beauty makes me forget my cares, and their smiles restore me to cheerfulness, and their fragrance refreshes me and strengthens me to bear what I must. And so, I go away serene again and thanking God for my garden. Surely, ugliness is the only sin of which flowers are capable. And that is usually man's fault, who will not leave nature alone. From the musings of Danska Dandridge.
Welcome to our Hurley's General Store. It is a store that we operate now. My dad actually built the place many, many years ago, in 1939, I believe it was, and I took it over in 79,
And we have quite a bit of fun here. We sell quite a variety of things: buckets, barrels, pottery, crockery, cast ironware, mountain musical instruments, furniture, clothing, records, and sundry other items too numerous to mention. A lot of local musicians actually show up on Thursday night. We've been doing an open jam session for the last 30 years without missing a Thursday, except Thanksgiving. It's a fun place to hang out. Our motto is, whatever you need, we have it, if we can find it.
Dr. John Wesley Harris first got his own degree at Storer College, and then he educated generations of black residents of Shepherdstown at Shadyside, Eastside, and then he retired. And after he retired, Eastside became the daycare center, and Ruth Brown became its first director.
My name is Ruth Brown. I went to Eastside School. The interesting thing, I think, about the 7th and the 8th grade was that the principal of the school, who was John Harris, also taught 7th and 8th grade. He allowed us to do some things that may not be allowed today. You know, we were allowed to help out in the kitchen. You know, if you got your homework done, and, you know, when he called on you in class, if you were in the 7th grade or the 8th grade and you had your homework done and you turned that in, he'd say, well, you can go downstairs and be of some assistance in the kitchen if you'd like. And there were just a few of us who wanted to do it. I was one of those who enjoyed getting out of class.
Well, I worked at the Yellow Brick Bank for 30 years. The day that Nancy Reagan came, we was in the kitchen doing things, getting ready to open up. Right away, Kevin said, nobody's going to wait on her but Clifford. So, and I said, well, why I have to wait on her? He said, because I want you to do it. So I waited on her and George Will. I talked to her. I asked her how come she stayed. She didn't eat much. She said, I don't eat much, she said, when I go around, because I have a lot of places to go to eat. So she got, at that time, they had the spinach and bacon salad. That's all she got.
Well, we're here on the east side of Shepherdstown, next to the railroad track, pretty obviously. The train came through here, railroad, in the 1870s. It brought a whole new atmosphere to Shepherdstown with the coming of the train, and incidentally, it was the Shenandoah Valley Railroad that came through initially, laid the tracks down, and mills and other commerce set up along the railroad track. We had, at one time, 3 grain mills working. We had some ice plants, apple packing concerns. There was quite a bit of activity here on this part of town. So the railroad brought a whole new dimension to Shepherdstown. It also allowed easier transportation for not just commerce and goods and services, but people. You could grab a passenger train here in Shepherdstown and go all the way to Roanoke in the south, up to Hagerstown, and catch other connections, go to Baltimore. So it was much easier to get around in those days. I remember when I was a very young kid, the trains, of course, were steam, and the steam whistles wailed through on their passage in the dark of night. My mother noticed that the passengers aboard the passenger trains were becoming fewer and fewer, and she thought that my brother and I should take a ride on the train before they disappeared. And it's kind of an amusing story. She took my brother and I 2 blocks north from my dad's store here to the railroad station, and walked in and right up to the teller's cage, and bought 3 tickets from Mr. Waddy on the teller's cage there. The next train that came through, we got on it, rode the 4 miles to Sharpsburg, got off the train, and walked back to Shepherdstown.
Every Thursday night at Hurley's, music and friendship never die. Toot, toot, what is that noise? It's a great steam train.
And And here we are at the farmers market every Sunday morning. Come and shop in Shepherdstown for locally grown home produce and whatever. Or stop by one of our wonderful world-class restaurants. Stop at some of our art galleries featuring local artisans in hot forged iron or stained glass. Take in a movie at the Old Opera House or one of the many musical venues. Stop at the Sweet Shop. Sit in the front window and enjoy a wonderful parade going by. Remember, it's Shepherdstown, West Virginia, my hometown.
If you would like a DVD copy of this program, visit us at roadtriptohistory.com.